Thanks for joining me today on the show. I'm so happy to have you with us for my conversation with Dr. Orman. Dr. Mort Orman has been a physician and decoded the way to conquer stress for himself when everything he tried had him coming up short. In fact, he likes to flip the whole conversation on its head. We really dive into the power of the words and the definitions, a lot of which we take for granted. So I think you'll get some good food for thought in this conversation with Dr. Orman. So glad you are with us for this short and sweet conversation coming to you from the Podapalooza event. Thanks for joining us and enjoy.
Living in a stressful world doesn't mean you have to give up on happiness. Instead, you can shift your perspective of stress and discover how to live your life in flow. Welcome to Happified. I'm your host, Susi Vine. Join me for inspiration and interviews with folks who are shining their light in the world in the areas of positive mindset, health, and wellness. I'm so happy to have you here.
So happy to have you with us today on Happified. We are coming to you live, recorded live in the Podatorium as a part of the Podapalooza event. And I am so excited to connect at last with Mort Orman. Dr. Mort is an internal medicine physician, a former corporate health and wellness executive, and a 40-year stress elimination expert. If your audience wants to know, and I think that you do, my dear audience, how you've been lied to about stress for decades and how these lies are harming you every day, Dr. Orman is here to shine some light on the subject for us. And I was just sharing before we hit record that I am a nurse's daughter, so I was raised with a familiarity of our Western medicine system. And now I enjoy a holistic approach. And I like to say I kind of had a front row seat to how stress shows up over time. So I'm sure you can speak to that through the course of your experience in your career, as well as seeing the impact in your patients. So thanks for joining me, Dr. Orman.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I too had a front row seat to stress. I went to medical school and they kind of teach you how to have stress in medical school. So, and then they send you out to open a practice and they don't teach you anything about running a business. So you have to figure that out on your own. And then you just run into all kinds of problems and difficulties. And so, yeah, I had a lot, as a young physician back 40 plus years ago, I had a lot of stress when I opened my practice. I had a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety. I was petrified to speak in public. I could have never done this, back then. That would have been a basket case. And I had relationship problems all over the place. I actually had 100% failure rate in all of my relationships with women. Every single one failed. They started off fine, but they just fizzled. And so there was a lot of stuff going on. And then, like you say, when you practice medicine every day, you're seeing patients that are coming in and you're seeing the results of years and years and years of stress. And then finally people have heart attacks or strokes or develop some other horrendous illness or something like that. And you're just seeing, every day you're just seeing it parading in front of you and you're going, and you're stressed and you're going like, is that coming for me? And so that got me really motivated to try and do something about my own stress. And I tried all the stress management stuff at the time and it just didn't do anything for me. I couldn't control my emotions. I couldn't control my relationships or improve them. And I was just beating my head against the wall and feeling really frustrated and feeling really, really demoralized because I had always been a winner. I could win at just about anything I put my mind to. And I just could not get anywhere with these stress problems I was having. I just kept banging my head against the wall. But again, you see all this damage parading in front of your eyes every day, and that keeps you moving forward. And so I started doing personal development courses. I learned a lot about myself that I never learned in medical school. I learned a lot about human beings. They don't teach you how to take care of human beings in medical school. They teach you how to take care of hearts and livers and lungs and stuff like that, but they forget the part about the human being attached to them. So I was learning that stuff. I was expanding my mind, expanding my horizons, and I was learning from some people who were willing to just sort of question the dogma in whatever area they had their expertise in. So I was just in that environment, and so it got me to start questioning the dogma around stress. And it really opened the door for me to start saying, well, is all this stuff that we're being taught and that I was taught, is it true? And once I started asking those kind of questions, and I had the good fortune to follow through and pursue them, I discovered almost everything we're taught to believe about stress isn't true. And that's ultimately what made the difference for me. And as a result of that one sort of door opening up and me walking through it and exploring, it took me a couple of years to figure out a lot of stuff, but I wouldn't have discovered had I not gone down that path. I would say the last 40 years of my life have been almost completely stress-free. And most people don't believe that's possible. That's one of the lies we're told about stress, that it's not possible to live stress-free in this crazy world today. And you would think if that's the case, because most people's experience is that, but it's not really true. If you really understand stress clearly and deeply, and you understand life in very effective ways, then you can get rid of a lot of the stress that most people feel stuck with and they can't do anything about. It's not because they don't have the ability, it's because they just don't have the right approach or the right training or the right principles and insights and stuff like that, which I was fortunate to have collected back 40 years ago. And it's been serving me very, very well ever since. I've written a whole bunch of books on how to get rid of stress without managing it. I've done over 100 live workshops for all kinds of people. I mean, doctors, nurses. My wife's a veterinarian, so I've done them for veterinarians, business owners, corporate executives. I even did a workshop for psychologists. I did a workshop for the clergy years ago, and I did one for the FBI in Baltimore, where I had my practice. So, I mean, I have worked with all kinds of different people. My focus right now is on professionals and business owners and other really success-driven people, because I want people who are really successful in life, but they just haven't figured out how to beat stress. And if you're a successful person and you haven't figured out how to beat stress, I can teach you how to beat it. So that's the kind of person I like to work with, because that's where I was, and that's what I finally figured out how to do.
I love it. And I think there's so much in what you just shared. And when I came into this space, as you said, when you have the opportunity, the gift, to see where you don't want to go, you can see the progression as people move through phases and stages of chronic disease because they've never addressed it when it was small. They didn't want to fix it until it was really broken, right? It's all right, doc, my blood pressure's high, or, I'm pre-diabetic. All of these little things that now we find even more things are tied to stress, chronic stress, and the way that it impacts us. And when I got super clear, that's not the future I wanted for myself. And I wanted to learn more. I thought, like everyone else does, the secret is turning down stress. We're just going to address it. We'll remove what it is, and it'll be fine. And I really fell into the field of positive psychology and fell in love with changing the whole perspective and the way that we look at it. But that's fairly, quote unquote, new science, really, come out of a really extraordinary breadth of research. But even that, I would say, is maybe 30 years old. So I'd love to hear how you, with the way that you just meet and address challenges, a little bit of competitive spirit, definitely looking to rise and overcome, like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'll knock it off the list, definitely an achiever. If you can sum it down, I mean, it's taken you books through the course of your work and exploration. So there's probably not one core myth about dealing with stress. You talked about managing it, and that's part of what we're doing wrong. But I'd love to hear, where do you tell people to start, or what do you see everyone doing wrong when it comes to, again, air quotes, managing stress?
Well, stress management is not just a set of techniques. I mean, it is a set of techniques, and that's what people understand about it. But what's underneath it is a whole set of assumptions and philosophies and understandings that prop it up. In other words, if you have to have certain beliefs about stress, you have to have certain beliefs about human beings in order to buy into the whole stress management mentality that tells you what I need to do is go out and learn how to do biofeedback and relaxation and meditation and all that good stuff. And I
Let
have
me
nothing
address
against,
this list and then I'll be calm.
yeah, and I have nothing against those things. They're all good. They all give you health benefits. They all have positive benefits, and they're certainly better than using drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or overeating or things that sometimes people do to deal with their stress. So they have benefits, but again, they just really get at the symptom level most of the time. And your problems never go away. You keep having to use the stress management techniques every day, because if you stop doing it, the stress is just going to resurface and you're going to be in trouble. But the first thing that I discovered back 40 years ago that I was doing wrong, and it's the first thing that I teach people I work with now to stop doing, is you got to get rid of the word stress. It's
We've
really
attached a lot to that word, haven't we?
it is a problem, and that's because stress is really just a buzzword. It's a concept. It's an abstraction. It's a word that was invented like in the 1940s by Hans Selye, who's the father of modern stress research. And do you know that prior to 1940, no one ever suffered from stress?
Amazing.
We went through World War I, we went through the Great Depression, we went through World War II. Not a single person during any of those periods of our history ever said that they were stressed. Now, there probably was a hell of a lot of suffering going on, and people had a lot of issues going on, but they didn't have this word stress to label it with, okay? So that just started in the 1940s, and we've latched on to this. Even Selye himself wrote in his first book that we should not think of stress as something that actually exists, that it's just a term that he made up because he was doing this new research and he had to communicate with it. He actually says it's an abstraction. Don't take it as a real thing, but nobody listened to it. So, but then there's all that science on all the physiology, you know, the hormonal, the cortisol, and the epinephrine, all the chemical and neurological. So that's real. You know, that stuff happens. But the second mistake we've made is we've defined stress in terms of those physical reactions. And it's really only half the story, really, because it's not that that stuff isn't true, but see, stress is a word that we use basically to stand for problems in our life. So when you and I say we're stressed, what we mean is we're having problems.
Yep.
And if we're talking and you say you're stressed and I say I'm stressed, you have no idea what problems I'm dealing with in my life. And I have no idea what problems you're dealing with in your life, because we just use this wastebasket term to just talk about any problem that we can imagine that we don't like. So if you're angry, that's stress. If you're anxious, that's stress. If you're having relationship problems, that's stress. If you're, you know, overwhelmed, that's stress. Whatever problem it is, or including health problems. If you have high blood pressure, or you have headaches, or you have tight muscles, they're all under this umbrella called stress. And we use the same word to talk about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different problems. And that's a problem, because I realized that I was, you know, what everybody's being taught today is take all your problems that you're having, dump them into one big basket, label that basket stress, and then ask yourself, how can I deal with my stress? As soon as you ask that question, you've lost the game. You're really going down a path that's not going to give you a win. It's not going to give you what the best outcome possible. Now, it doesn't mean you won't feel better, but you're still going to be mainly focused on symptoms. The way to win against stress is to stop trying to deal with stress. Realize that's like trying to chase a unicorn, because you can chase it all you want, but you're never going to be able to grab onto it. It's going to disappear as soon as you think you can catch it. So the idea that we can deal with our stress, or that we suffer from stress, is a myth. Okay, we're suffering from problems, and it's those problems that are driving all those physiologic changes. You know, that's what's doing. When I do a workshop with slides and stuff, I'll frequently, to demonstrate this, I'll take a picture of a horse and I'll cut it in half, and I'll just show the back end of the horse on a slide, and I'll ask the audience, is this a horse? And of course, everybody will say, no, that's not a horse. That's just half of a horse. And I said, yes, that's the point. It's half of a horse. You gotta take into account the front half of the horse. That back half doesn't go anywhere without the front half, you know? And the front half is driving the back half. So that's what we do with stress. We look at all these physiologic changes in the body, and we define stress that way, okay? And we forget the front end of the horse, which is what's driving all that stuff. That stuff doesn't happen on its own. all those hormonal and neurological stuff and blood pressure stuff and heart rate stuff, it doesn't just happen for no reason. There's something going on. And what's going on is all these problems we're having in life with, their kids, with our, it could be health, it could be the economy, it could be Democrats, it could be Republicans, it could be Congress, it could be economy. You just,
Right. Fill in word. I mean, if we're running short, there's always just look around and you can choose a problem to put in the hopper if you're
then you can use this little word COVID. This little word COVID comes into play from nowhere. And now we got another problem that's causing all kinds of other downstream problems. So we're not just having problems and problems and problems. And that's what we mean when we say we have stress. So the real way to win against stress is not to manage the symptoms. It's to stop trying to deal with stress, figure out what your problems are, and then get down to the causes of those problems. So for me, I was dealing with anger and anxiety and public speaking fear and relationship failures. Those were very specific problems. And it wasn't until I started focusing on them and asking myself, why am I getting angry so often? Mm-hmm. What's causing that? Why am I afraid to speak in public? What's causing that? Why are all my relationships fail? I used to diagnose or do a postmortem on every relationship. And it always turned out it was something about the woman that was the reason why it didn't work out, And so I picked the wrong woman. So can't pick somebody with those characteristics. So I would pick a different kind of woman the next time. And the same thing would happen, And after enough of those, it finally gets through your skull that maybe there's other factors in play. So then when I finally got to that point and I cried uncle and I said, wait, I got to be generating this somehow. I didn't know how.
One common denominator here.
Yes, I didn't know how, but I kind of felt like, I got to go look in here. I started looking in here, and then I was doing a lot of personal development stuff, so I was getting some input and getting some help in the process. So I started identifying things that I was doing that I thought were good strategies for succeeding in relationships. They were horrible, and I really had it was just a blind spot, a big blind spot. They were driving my behavior, but I just didn't know what they were, or that they were even strategies that I had. But once I could see them, I could say, oh, that's awful. I wouldn't want to be with somebody if they did that, or they treated me like that. And then I realized that, okay, I've got this supposed success system that's really a failure system. I better figure out how to get a success system, So I learned some things about what works in relationships. I've been married to my wife for 37 years now. Most of my relationships for the last 40 years have been much smoother because I stopped doing all these crazy things that I didn't realize I was doing that was damaging my relationships. And the same thing about anger. I haven't hardly ever get angry in the last 40 years. And if I do get angry, I know how to get rid of it like instantly or within hours. I never sit around with anger for days or weeks or hold grudges against people. I can diffuse that anger very, very quickly because I know where it's coming from because I did that work to find that out, just like I did the work to find out where my relationship failures were coming from. So that's how I like to work with people. If people come in and say they're stressed, I know they're not. Okay. First thing I know that can't be their problem. Okay. So they've got other problems. So then we find out what the problems are. And then I know that they don't really understand. Firstly, they haven't been focused on their problems. And so we focus them for the first time. And then they probably don't know how to identify the causes within them that are contributing because we're not taught how to do that. I wasn't taught how to do that in all my education, including 7 years of medical training. Nobody taught me how to do that. I had to learn that on my own after I got out of medical school and medical training. So you just know that people, they don't really see everything that's going on. So no wonder they can't get rid of their stress. And no wonder they draw the conclusion is, well, stress is just inevitable. You can't do anything about it,
So then I have to manage it and we put energy in the wrong place.
As long as you think about it that way and react to it that way, and you don't go where the action actually is, you're not going to get rid of it. And you're going to conclude that that's just life. That's how I thought when I was struggling and didn't see a way out. I really didn't think I was ever going to find a way out, but I just kept pushing. And then when I found a way out, I looked back and I said, whoa, there was a lot that I didn't see back then that I see now that's made a huge difference. And now I'm on a completely different path and I'm approaching it in a completely different way. And now all these things are opening up for all these other problems that I've had in life that I found difficult to deal with. And now I can deal with them better because now I know it's not just the stuff outside of me that's at cause. I'm playing a role in some way, even if I don't know what it is. And a lot of times you go into a problem and you don't know exactly how you're contributing to it or how you somehow brought it about. But it's good to know that you probably did. And then you can try to investigate and see. And usually you'll find very specific things that you were doing to create that problem or to keep it stuck so it doesn't resolve. And it could be something as simple as not asking for help. That's that's an internal cause of a lot of suffering that people have. They have a problem, it's solvable, but they're too proud, or they won't ask for help, or they want to do it themselves, or they've been indoctrinated by the culture that you have to do it yourself, otherwise you're weak. And we get all these crazy ideas, and it keeps us from just going to somebody and saying, hey, could you help me with this? Or hiring somebody to help you solve it, And then we remain stuck and we don't realize we could have solved that problem. It's like not asking for directions. To fix that real easy.
Well, and I think that's definitely the case. Feeling shame or, not wanting to feel less than, certainly not wanting to feel like a failure if anyone else is watching. And so it can be hard, and we can't underestimate the value of having that external perspective, because when we're in the weeds, it's really hard to see what we're in the thick of. And so, to the point of your story, as long as you were totally applying yourself to these different individual situations, and they influence each other, they overlap.
And some of the internal causes were similar. They crossed, multiple different types of problems.
Yeah. And I see our reaction to the problems in our lives. I have to think about my words. We tend to paint with a really broad brush. And I love how you've broken it down and stepped back and said, it's not a problem of stress. It's a problem of how we address our problems.
It's a problem with problems.
We want to lump it into a big old bucket and say it's bigger than me.
One of the examples I give is I ask people, have they ever been on vacation at a nice tropical place, and have they ever seen a pretty sunrise or a pretty sunset? And everybody says, oh yeah. I said, no, you didn't. you never saw the sunrise or the sunset. The sun doesn't rise, it doesn't set. It's the earth rotating. The sun just stays still in one place, and the earth rotates. And it looks like it's rising. So the sunrise and sunset are these two little stories that we made up, that we agreed that we'll all pretend they're real things happening in the world when they're not. Okay, it's like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and all that kind of stuff. These are these stories we made up in language, and so we talk. And stress is the same thing. It's like, I'm suffering from stress. Oh, I'm very stressed. No, you're not. You're just having problems. But the equivalent of the earth rotating is, whenever I think I'm stressed, I'm actually having problems. And it's not the story somebody made up in 1940, that we've carried on, that is just a story. And it's different. There are things in medicine, like appendicitis is a word, but it's not a story. If you've got appendicitis, you say, oh, that's just a story. Don't worry about it. That's not going to be.
It could go badly. That story could have a bad ending.
But that's exactly what you should do when you say I'm stressed. I think I'm stressed. No, that's a story. Forget that story. What are you actually dealing with? What's going on in your life that you're actually dealing with?
Yeah, and the power of questions, and I think that's really should give people a lot of hope. If we feel like we've been banging our head against the wall, trying to answer the same question. Okay, what question can we ask instead?
Yeah, and that question is often, how can I deal with my stress? And it's like the worst question you can ask.
Yeah, if you want to feel overwhelmed, think about how to live a less stressful life. Big air quotes if you're listening to that one. Because that pursuit could be endless if that's what you're chasing.
It's interesting. Overwhelm is not like stress. See, overwhelm is a specific problem that comes under the stress umbrella. It's one of the types of stress, just like anger and anxiety and fear of public speaking. Overwhelm is a specific feeling and a specific set of circumstances in one's life. That's a problem that you can actually hone in on. So you can say, okay, I'm not stressed, I'm overwhelmed, which is good. Okay. Now the next question is, okay, why am I feeling overwhelmed, or why am I overwhelmed? Why do I have more to do than I physically or mentally can handle? How did that come about? What were the external causes and other people making demands? And what were the internal causes? Where was I in the equation? Was I not saying no? Do I not know how to, use time effectively, my time effectively? Am I easily distracted? Do I not have enough help with the house or the home or whatever? And, I've got all these pressures. Did I not negotiate well in terms of what my job responsibilities would be? Did I go to somebody and say, look, this is too much for me to handle. You need to take some of this off my plate. There are all these things that go into the problem of overwhelm, and including others, that where we play a role. And we have to look at that. And it's not that the problem is insolvable. If you don't take effective action, it will feel insolvable and it will be insolvable, but it doesn't mean it somebody else couldn't help you solve it, or you don't have the ability. Most people have tremendous ability to get rid of stress. And if you'd asked me back 40 years ago when I was suffering with all this stuff and I couldn't get it out of it, if you said to me, you have this tremendous potential to get rid of almost all the stress in your life, I would have said, you're full of crap. There's no possible way that I have that inside me. It's just not possible. In my experience, it's not true. And then fast forward, 5 or 6 years later, and I look back and I go, wow, that was in me. It was there all along. And I had no idea that I had that power, that I had that ability. I thought I was incompetent when it came to dealing with stress. I thought I lacked the power. That maybe other people can do it, but I can't. And that's not the truth about almost everybody I've ever worked with in the last 40 years has had tremendous power that they're not utilizing, and they don't know that they have inside them. And when we work together and they all of a sudden they see these problems that they struggled with for years suddenly clear up or get much better, they go like, wow, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I had that in me, but it's a common reaction, and it tells you that it's there in all of us. It's just we're not, our society doesn't teach us, our schools don't teach us, we don't have role models, media doesn't help us realize that's a possibility. It's just all craziness around us that keeps us stressed and that keeps these lies going. And that's what we're up against, And so you really need to penetrate through all the BS and get clear about what's really true. When I say I'm stressed, what is it? What's actually going on? What are the steps I need to take? Even if you don't know how to answer the questions, you got to ask the right questions. And then you can get help if you can't answer them on your own. And in the beginning, most people won't be very good at it because they're not experienced. They're not trained, they're not experienced, but at least they're on the right path,
Right. And can't blame ourselves for not knowing where to begin when all of the popular literature says start here.
Yeah.
But having that curiosity, I think, is super powerful. Starting to ask questions, starting to ask why this isn't working. Why do I feel this way? What can I change? And always working with someone who has that experience and
Yes.
power to reflect is so helpful in cutting a lot of the frustration out of that path back towards.
I just wish more stress experts were teaching people to do that. I've been kind of like one of these lone voices out here for 40 years saying, we're going the wrong way. We're going the wrong way. And it's like, the other, opinion is just so strong and it's coming from so many different sources. It's just like, you're trying to hold back an ocean, and it's massive, and it's damaging people.
Yeah, making them feel helpless or incapable or, overwhelmed again by what all they feel is against them. Just
And
to try to feel better.
I saw a lot from COVID. What COVID really told me, which I knew anyway, but it really highlighted it for me, is COVID should tell us that we were very poorly prepared to deal with a major stress event before COVID hit. People didn't take the time to get themselves prepared to deal with stress. They didn't learn how to do this, what we're talking about today. And so COVID hits and everybody is discombobulated by all the changes and new dynamics and stuff that is really negatively impacting a lot of people. And then relationships, people are thrown together where they are stuck together, and that creates all kinds of, it shows they don't have a lot of relationship skills that they thought they had. And all kinds of things came out from COVID, and also about science, how we think about science, interpret science. all this stuff about how our thinking has been really poor prior to COVID, and our emotional ability to handle emotions and stress was really poor prior to COVID. And COVID just showed it to us, like, wow. So the problem is most people didn't use the time off during COVID to build that, to build those abilities to deal with stress again when the next thing comes, because whatever the next thing is, we're going to be in the same boat. There can be some people like me. I had very little stress during COVID because I had this neat system that I could go to. And I had some experience in the area that, nothing really fazed me that much. I kind of knew what was going to happen before it happened. And I knew how to deal with the stuff that most people were finding it difficult to deal with. And because I had that system in place, that I built years ago and that I've worked on for the last 40 years. And I know most people didn't have that kind of a thing in place. And we really should. We shouldn't be complacent with, things aren't too stressful right now, so I don't have to do any work, to learn how to deal with stress. Well, something's going to hit. Somebody's going to get sick. Somebody's going to die. Right. You're going to lose your business. You're going to lose your job. Some horrible thing's going to happen, and you're going to need those skills, and it's going to come on suddenly.
And so it's on us to learn from our lessons and learn the better path forward. Thank you, Dr. Orman, for jumping in with me. I will have your contact information in the show notes so people can connect with you, check out those books that you have been sharing with the world, and tune into a more empowered approach.
Tell you, I do a free 1 hour talk every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's called 3 Big Lies About Stress, that are impacting your health, your business, and your life. And so I go over some of these points and some other ones, and it's totally free. I don't sell anything to anybody. It's just a public service that I'm doing. And all you have to do is go to 3bigliesaboutstress.com, and you can sign up to attend one of them. And it's the same presentation I do every Thursday, so you only have to go once. It's not an ongoing series, but I would definitely recommend that people experience that once and get that education to get them on the right path.
And have an evening well spent. Empowerment is knowledge is power. And once we have that, then we can make the choices and start to move the needle.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been a treat to finally get to connect with you.
Yes.
And I wish you a great rest of your day. Take care.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for tuning in today. Check out the show notes for any links we mentioned. To learn more about living life with less stress and more flow, visit happifiedlife.com. And if you found value in today's episode, make sure you subscribe to catch the next one and leave a review to help fellow pod surfers find Happified. Until next time, keep on shining.